In May of 1999, a 14-year-old girl would head to the police station in Hong Kong. It was there she would inform them that she was being haunted by the ghost of a woman she and her friends had tortured to death. Police would then follow her to her apartment where they would make a horrific discovery. In the home, they would find a Hello Kitty doll with the skull of a woman sewn inside. This case would begin 2 years prior when a 23-year-old woman named Fan Man-Yee met a 34-year-old man named Man-Lok at a nightclub. With Fan being a prostitute and drug addict, and Chan being a pimp and drug dealer, they would both hit it off rather quickly. Unfortunately, Fan had already lived a hard life since she was born. As a young child, she was abandoned by her family, which led her to being raised by an orphanage. At the age of 15, she would be kicked out due to being too old. Things would only spiral down from here as she would soon become addicted to drugs and begin prostituting herself to support her habit. At the age of 21, she would work at a brothel where she would marry one of her clients. As you can guess, the marriage was not the best. Neighbors would later report hearing constant screams and cries from their apartment. Her husband was violently abusive. Eventually, they would both have a son together. Fan would then quit drugs, prostitution, and leave her turbulent marriage in order to protect her son. From this point, she would get a job as a hostess at a nightclub where she would eventually meet and date Chan. Only a few months later, Fan would attempt to steal his wallet as well as the 4,000 Hong Kong dollars inside of it. She would do this in order to support her drug habit. Unknown to her, Chan was a triad member, so this theft would not sit well with him. Once he realized his money was gone, he would send 2 of his friends after her. They would succeed in kidnapping her and recovering the stolen money. Even with this, they would demand that she pay even more money than she had originally taken, exactly 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. Fan would be taken to an apartment where she would be forced to prostitute herself for around a month. Eventually, she would pay back the money. Even at this point, Chan and the group would refuse to let her go. They would soon decide that prostitution wasn't enough. And with this, electrical wire would be tied around her wrists, to which she was then hung from the ceiling. From this point, she would be used as a literal punching bag. Even worse, they would beat her with metal pipes and table legs until her bones broke and her flesh was bloody and bruised. Plastic would be lit on fire, then placed over her so the burning liquid would drip onto her skin. Her burn wounds would then be covered in chili oil to increase the pain. During all of this, Fan would be forced to smile and state that she enjoyed their beatings. If she did not comply or cried, she would be beaten further. One of the group members, known only as Ah Fong, was a 13-year-old girl, the new girlfriend of Chan. Ah Fong would later report that she witnessed Fan being kicked in the head over 50 times by one of the group members. When the group became bored, they would go into the next room to play video games and watch TV. This was all while Fan was left to suffer her horrific injuries. The torture of Fan Man-Yee would last approximately a month until she was discovered dead by the 13-year-old girl. At this point, the group would move her to the bathtub, using a hacksaw to dismember her. Individual pieces of Fan's body would be taken and boiled in hot water on the stove to cover up the smell of decomposition. Later on, it would be discovered that the group would cook dinner in the same pots they used to boil Fan's body parts. They would continue this process until nothing was left of the woman but her head. After they had finished cooking her body parts, they would toss them out with the trash of the household. At this point, They would put her decapitated head into a pot to boil as they did with the other body parts. Later reports would uncover that the group would cook noodles at the same time they were boiling Fan's head. Even more sickening, they would stir the food in the head with the same pair of chopsticks. After the flesh had been completely removed from the cranium, the group would remove it from the pot and sew it into a Hello Kitty mermaid doll. In addition to this, they would keep one of her teeth as well as her organs in a plastic bag. All members of the group were meant to stay quiet about the murder. However, Ah Fong would be overcome with guilt throughout the following weeks. She would also suffer nightmares from witnessing the abuse and partaking in the torment. Eventually, the guilt would become too much to bear and she would reach out to the police, who didn't take it seriously until they investigated. After the story came out to the media, it was so horrific and terrifying that many people watching didn't believe it was true. This was until police investigation uncovered evidence proving everything about the story was real. The people of Hong Kong would be left horrified. During trial, the group would claim that Fan had died due to a drug overdose. While it is likely that the group lied about this, there is no way to be entirely sure. Fan's remaining body parts were in such bad condition that examiners were unable to determine the exact cause of death. Because of this, the jury would convict the group of manslaughter instead of murder. The reason behind this decision was due to believing that the group did not intend to take her life. However, they did recognize that Fan died as a direct result of their abuse. With the exception of the 13-year-old girl, the group would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. One of the men named Leung Shing Cho would appeal to the court and reduce his sentence to 18 years. He would be released in April of 2014. 8 years later, he would sexually assault a 10-year-old girl and be sent back to prison for 1 more year. Justice Peter Nugent would state, "Never in Hong Kong in recent years has a court heard of such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness. Even an animal would not have been maltreated in the same way as that received by the deceased." The group would be evaluated and found to have zero remorse about the incident. After this, Fan's skull would be returned to her family and cremated. The apartment building where she was tortured would be demolished and turned into a hotel. 3 Buddha portraits would be placed in the hotel to pay respect to Fan.